Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why you can't stop procrastinating? Well, this new study might have a clue actually. This study is all about music and how we feel when we listen to it. Did you know that sometimes the music might sound happy or sad, but you might not feel that exact same emotion yourself? It is like the music is telling a story. But your heart is hearing a slightly different version of that story. This is exactly what interesting researchers Ioanna, Zioga, Charalampos, Papageorgiou, and Christina Anagnostopoulou set out to discover. They were curious about why the feelings we get from music, what they call felt emotion, don't always match the feelings the music seems to be expressing. Think about it when a song sounds super energetic, but you just feel kind of calm, or when a piece sounds really sad, but it actually makes you feel a bit uplifted. This difference can happen in two ways. Either you feel less of the emotion than the music seems to express, or you feel more of it. They wanted to know what causes this emotional divergence. So, why is this important? Well, understanding emotions is key to understanding ourselves, and music is a huge part of our emotional lives. This research dives into the psychology of music to figure out if there are patterns in when our internal feelings and the music's expressed feelings don't line up. The big question here is what makes our felt emotions different from what the music sounds like it is expressing? And does this happen the same way for all kinds of emotions? They looked at two main things: arousal, which is about how energetic or exciting something feels, and valence, which is about how positive or negative the feeling is. To get to the bottom of this, the researchers designed a really cool experiment. They gathered 74 adults and had them participate in pairs called Dyads. Most importantly, these weren't just random people. Some of them were friends, and some were strangers. They had one person be the performer, who was a skilled musician comfortable with improvisation, and the other person was the listener. They sat about 4 meters apart so they could hear and see each other. The core of the experiment involved live musical improvisation. The performer would improvise music for about 90 seconds. Before each improvisation, the performer would get a secret instruction on a computer screen. These instructions were for different styles of playing. One was to play something conventional and predictable, another was to play something unconventional and experimental, and the third was to play something creative and imaginative. They did this 12 times for each pair, mixing up the styles. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. After each improv session, both the performer and the listener had to rate a few things. They rated how fast or slow time felt like it passed. Then they rated the arousal and valence they felt. Importantly, they did this from two angles. First, their own internal feeling, what they felt, and second, what they thought the music was expressing. They used a scale from 1 to 9 for all these ratings. The researchers then crunched all this data using some advanced statistical tools. They were looking to see if things like whether you were the performer or the listener, if you were friends or strangers, or even your personality and mood, affected how different your felt emotions were from the music's expressed emotions. They specifically looked at both the size of this difference, meaning how far apart the feelings were, and the direction of the difference, whether you felt less inhibition or more amplification than the music expressed. So, what did they find? Prepare for a bit of a surprise. When they looked at the magnitude or the size of the difference between felt and expressed emotions, they didn't find any strong links to social factors like being performance or listener, or whether they were friends or strangers. Personality traits and current mood didn't seem to make a big difference to how much you're feeling straight from the music. This was true for both how energetic you felt, arousal, and how positive or negative you felt, valence. But here is where things get really interesting. When they looked at the direction of the emotional divergence, that is when they saw some clear patterns. First off, most of the time, your felt emotion and the music's expressed emotion were actually pretty aligned, about 40% of the time. What you felt matched what the music seemed to be expressing. That is actually a lot of alignment. However, when they did diverge, it wasn't symmetrical for arousal, which is about energy. There was more inhibition. This means people often felt less aroused than the music seemed to express. Think of a really fast, intense piece of music that you just aren't feeling the same level of energy from. On the other hand, for valence, which is about positivity and negativity, they saw more amplification. This means people often felt more positive or negative than the music itself seemed to express. So, a happy-sounding song might actually make you feel even happier, or a sad song might make you feel even sadder. Now, let's dig into why this amplification and inhibition happens. For arousal, they found that performers were more likely to experience arousal amplification, meaning they felt more aroused than the music expressed. This makes sense because performers are actively engaged, motorically active, and constantly anticipating. They're creating the music. which likely pumps up their internal energy more than they attribute to the music itself. Interestingly, this arousal amplification was also more common in people who scored high on openness to experience. That is a personality trait related to being curious, imaginative, and open to new things. This makes sense because improvisation can be unpredictable, and people open to experience might engage more with that uncertainty. Leading to greater internal arousal, also people who scored higher on emotional contagion, meaning they're good at catching others' emotions, were more likely to show arousal amplification. They might be more attuned to the performer's emotional state, boosting their own felt arousal. For valence amplification, a different story unfolded. This was more linked to situational states. When people reported feeling a more positive mood, they were more likely to feel more positive than the music expressed. This is called mood congruent processing, where your current mood influences how you interpret things. Also, when people felt time was passing more quickly, they were more likely to show valence amplification. This suggests they were really absorbed in the music and the experience, which might lead to a more intense positive or negative feeling beyond what the music itself directly expressed. So, what does this all mean? The study shows that while our feelings and the music's expression often align when they don't, there is a distinct pattern. Arousal tends to be inhibited, meaning we feel less energized than the music suggests. Valence, on the other hand, tends to be amplified, meaning our positive or negative feelings might be stronger than what the music seems to convey. The fact that performers, those high in openness, and those with high emotional contagion are more prone to arousal amplification suggests that our physical and mental engagement with music plays a big role in how we experience its energy. It is not just about passively receiving, it is about how we actively process and integrate the sound. And the link between positive mood, time flying by, and valence amplification tells us that our subjective experience and emotional state deeply shape how we perceive the pleasure or displeasure in music. When we're in a good mood and totally absorbed, the valence of our experience can be even more pronounced. A key point is that while the direction of divergence was influenced by these factors, the magnitude or the overall size of the difference wasn't. This might mean that how much our emotions diverge from the music is a pretty stable characteristic, but how they diverge, whether we feel more or less, is more flexible and shaped by our role, personality, and current state. It was also interesting that whether participants were friends or strangers didn't make a difference to the divergence. This suggests that while familiarity might affect how we connect with others during music, it doesn't necessarily change how our internal feelings line up with the music's expression. In conclusion, this study gives us a fascinating glimpse into the complex relationship between what music expresses and what we feel. It highlights that our emotional experience of music is not just a one-way street, but a dynamic interplay shaped by our role, our personalities, and our immediate feelings. The next time you listen to music, pay attention to whether your arousal feels more or less intense than the music, and whether your feelings of happiness or sadness are amplified. It is a window into your own unique emotional response. So, what do I think about this research? I think it is brilliant because it moves beyond simply asking, does this music make you feel happy, into the much richer territory of how and why our feelings might differ. The methodology using live improvisation and the performer-listener dynamic really captures the essence of real-world music experiences. A strength is the clear distinction between magnitude and direction of divergence. The limitation, perhaps, is that measuring emotions after each improvisation, rather than continuously, might miss some very fleeting changes. But overall, this study provides a robust framework for understanding the nuanced ways we connect with music emotionally. It makes you wonder what other real-world scenarios might show similar patterns of amplified or inhibited emotions. Imagine applying this to film scores, theater, or even spoken word performances. What do you guys think about your own listening experiences? Do you find your arousal being inhibited or amplified? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to hit that like button. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating science and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.